There we go. Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot, Christina. And thanks for the opportunity to share some of the Canadian experience, I guess, that I've had. Just wanted to note that Dalton Whitmer is also an agronomist in Montana, based out of Montana with IND Hemp. So he can certainly add to the conversation, I think. He's heard this presentation before, so it'll be a second time for him. But a little background on myself. I started with hemp, actually working with the crop in 1998 up here in Canada. It's when it was re-legalized. And at that point in time, I was a research agronomist for the province of Manitoba, working on diversified crops. And so it was a perfect fit when hemp became an opportunity. And even more to the fact, where I farm, and I do farm with my brother-in-law here, we're in a very limited growing season up where we are. Like, we got about 90 frost-free days. And so our growers in this area are always looking for another cash crop, something to rotate in with canola, wheat, our two main crops, with canola being our main cash crop. And hemp fit in quite nicely. Because of its photoperiod sensitivity, where it's able to mature here. We do have some stones on our fields, and when you're harvesting hemp for grain in particular, you raise the cutter bar, the header quite high, so that's not an issue. So it's been well adapted for this region and Western Manitoba, for that sake. So in 2015, I joined the industry as the industry with a company called Hemp Genetics International, which recently, actually almost a year and a little bit now, has just merged with another company to form Verve Seed Solutions. And so that's the company that I'm involved with now as the GM for it, kind of wearing a number of hats, sort of the lead agronomist, the salesperson, bookkeeper, general manager, etc. So we're a small company, but have a number of different, we've got about 16 varieties that are on the list of approved cultivars that can be grown in Canada. Canada is a little bit different, obviously, than each of the individual states. You have to pick a variety that is on that list of approved cultivars, and to get on there, essentially, you have to provide the data that shows that crop is stable, meaning that it is under 0.03% THC. For the testing in Canada, for that, it's only on the pedigree level. That's the other aspect of seed in Canada. It has to be AOSCA certified for a farmer to plant that. There's no farmer safe seed or anything. So fresh seed has to be bought every year. I'm a pedigreed seed grower. We have to test that variety, those cultivars, either at breeder, registered, or certified level. But once it gets into the farmer's hands as certified seed, he no longer has to test it because it's gone through those 3 years of testing previous to that. So it's a little bit different in that respect. So, just on the farming side, again, farm with my brother-in-law here, have always been farming. We farm about 8,000 acres of a number of different pedigreed crops, not just hemp, but also peas, soybeans, wheat for seed production, and then we'll grow canola for commercial production. So I got a presentation here that kind of goes through some of the early, not just the benefits, but some of the challenges of growing this crop. And it's not meant to scare people, but it's just made to make them aware that not everything you read on the internet, believe it or not, is completely true. And sometimes hemp can be a little challenging to establish. It's a little finicky to get going. And then there are issues, or could be issues, if you're not aware of them at harvest time, for either grain and or fiber, as Dalton and I were kind of chatting a little bit earlier about the wrapping of hemp. So I'm going to share my screen and get into this PowerPoint presentation, and then at any time during that, it's a small enough crowd. I think you can just pipe up and ask a question if you want, or leave it till the end, and there'll be plenty of time at the end of it to go through any questions that you have. So, okay, so. All right. The proverbial question is, can you see my screen? And I'll just assume that you can. And continue on. So there's my email address, my phone number, which is a cell number. You could text me at that number too. But are you ready for the 2023 season? And I understand that it looks like Idaho was the last state to come to the party, the hemp party, it sounds like. So yeah, welcome, and let's get started with some of the fun things that we can do here. Okay, so that's myself, obviously on the left. That's one of our plant breeders in the middle, and one of the early founders of the company, Gary Meyer, on the right-hand side. We were one of the first companies, I guess, to be published on a hemp journal or something like that, I guess. But that's why the photos look so professional. Anyway, growing hemp successfully, what the market is demanding is the first question you want to ask yourself. There's no sense growing something well, there are, you can grow something just to grow it and learn from it. But if you want to make money at it, find out what the market is demanding, how you can supply that. And I should emphasize the quality hemp, because all of these markets, that's exactly what they want. They're not expecting you to bring in something that doesn't meet their quality standards. And to do that, it's a systematic approach on how to maximize that quality. So proper planning, which includes agronomics, and which we're going to go over here. And a lot of it has to do on harvest and storage practices, whether it's for grain, CBD, and or fiber. All of those things are important aspects for high quality. The hemp industry has gone through a number of different challenges and opportunities, and pivot from friends show where there's certain companies that have pivoted away from CBD into grain, into fiber, and vice versa. Other companies are looking at the opportunity of CBD. In Canada, again, we did not get to play with flower, or didn't even know about CBD essentially until 2017. So we're certainly well behind the US as far as market establishment there. The other challenge in Canada is we definitely have regulations. All CBD is sold through dispensaries. And so the marketability is somewhat different. So again, most of the hemp grown in Canada, 90% is for either grain or fiber at this point in time. So when we look at agronomy, of course, there's the typical things we want to take a look at: field selection, crop rotation, what variety should you grow or do you want to grow, seeding, some tips there, fertility, and then weed control, and finally harvest. So with regards to soil properties, you want to try to find a nice clay, loamy, more of a loamy than clay type of soil texture. Hemp does not like to have its feet wet, and heavy clay, if you happen to get a rain event of any type, if you've got standing water there, hemp just cannot tolerate for any length of time excess moisture. And what you'll see is it starts to yellow in the growing point, which is in the middle, and it just starts to die off. So and the reverse of that, sandy soils also will work, but then you need adequate moisture because you don't have that moisture holding capacity. And so important to either irrigate or have it on irrigation in those instances. Another aspect of hemp that's kind of unique is that it will show you any soil imperfection that you do have in that field. So whether it's salinity or compaction or this internal drainage, it will show you that. So it is, as much as you think that it's a weed and it'll grow like crazy anywhere, it can be quite fussy to get established. So this is what I was mentioning. The growing point tends to get yellow. You see the plants in the right hand side here are also yellow, stunted, and probably dying, or at least they're going to be very short and not not very productive compared to the rows that didn't have that standing moisture. This is an overhead picture of a section of industrial hemp, one of our pedigree seed growers that, again, didn't pick necessarily the best field for production. He seeded the field, had about a 3-inch rain 2 weeks or 3 weeks after seeding, and the lower right hand corner you can see what I mean by what do we call it? Anyway, sorry, my mind went somewhere else. But you can see that the difference is where the water was sitting, you have weed growing there, compaction, sorry, that's what I was looking for, the word. So compaction in the bottom right corner, excess moisture without good drainage, killed the hemp and just allowed everything else to sort of come in to take over. And in this case, it was probably canola and weeds. And again, on the quality side of things, that's just not something it makes it that much harder to clean it to quality standards. Another important aspect is nutrients. And again, it's just too often that I see, hemp can be grown without any fertilizers, and it, doesn't require nutrients. And it's really, it's true to a certain degree. If you didn't want to grow it as a crop and you didn't want to make money at it, then for sure you can grow it, and it'll grow in a lot of different ways. But if you want to maximize your return, we can see here, this was just a study that I was involved with when I was with the province of Manitoba, showing the uptake of nutrients in hemp as compared to canola. The kilograms per hectare is stated here, but that's a very easy conversion to pounds per acre. It's almost identical, except for perhaps about 10% less. So we can see here the nitrogen nutrient, hemp will uptake up to 200 pounds an acre of nitrogen into the plant, as compared to canola that takes up about 120 pounds. When you haul that product to the processor, in this case the grain, so hemp grain or canola seed, you're taking off about 40 pounds of nitrogen for hemp and about 65 pounds. So this tells us that there's a lot of nitrogen that's tied up in the stalk and the leaf material that's the plant is utilizing. If you're only taking that seed off the field, you're not taking 200 pounds of nitrogen off the field, as long as you're not taking off green plant material. So if hemp has the opportunity to go through either a retting process or sitting over winter, a lot of those nutrients will just leach back into the soil and be available for the next crop. Potassium, the same thing, very similar to canola's needs. The other one, sorry, that's phosphate. Potassium here is a high user also, and potassium in the plant is utilized for straw strength and moving those nutrients up and down the plant. And so it's no wonder with a very tall plant that it is a high potassium user. And then sulfur use is also about very minimal. So those are the 4 macronutrients. You take care of those, there's certain micronutrients that a person can involve, but taking care of the macros is the most important aspect so far. Oops. The nitrogen aspect and what's making hemp a bit of a challenge to grow these days is the cost of nitrogen and how it is increased. So this just shows you from January 2016 what the average price per unit of nitrogen was in 2016 to where it is in January of 22, a year ago. It's come down from that to a certain degree, but the reason I have this is not to say that you shouldn't be putting you should put as much nitrogen as you can afford, first of all, but the importance of having hemp in a proper rotation is what I'm trying to stress here. So this is an example of a satellite imagery that is called NDVI. So it's basically the reflectance and the health of what in this case is a hemp crop. So there's 3 distinct fields here that had 3 separate crop types in 2020. and 2021, this was all seeded to hemp, and that's a picture in time of that. So When we had fabamine in 2020, which is a nitrogen fixing legume, the plant was able to utilize that. And we can see there was also actual soil tests done, and there was a lot of residual nitrogen that was left in the ground with this fabamine. So whether it's fabamines, peas, are the two more prolific nitrogen fixers, fabamine the most prolific fixer. Again, it's very important to have rotation. Now, on the wheat side of things, wheat is a high nitrogen user, but not as much as canola. So that's really the take-home message here, is that we're not going to be growing hemp on hemp on hemp, because Mother Nature doesn't like that too much, and she will start to throw curveballs at you. So having the proper rotation is important, and nitrogen is an expensive. And why not grow that nitrogen for your previous crop instead of having to pay for it? So then variety selection, and I'm involved with the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance as a director, and I chair the National Variety Trials. This is where each of the different seed organizations has a chance to put one of their varieties in. There's 10 to 12 different locations throughout Canada that the trials are in. This is just a picture of one of the trials that I was involved with Manitoba Agriculture. But what you want to try to do is get localized data. And so that's what I would like to do in Idaho, I guess, is I have an idea what some varieties will do as far as performance there. But it's really nothing like having it grown in your own backyard, in your own soils and climate and environment to give you a proper understanding. There are more and more data sets available for us. We have what's called Seed Manitoba and Seed Saskatchewan, where it lists the different varieties and their performance over a period of time. And always the more site years, the better. Never just sell the farm on one data point or on 1 year. I've found with this crop, every year there seems to be one variety that'll do better in that environment or that climate from that previous year. So look at it over time. We've got, again, some of our site years are up to 20 to 30. Got my cat crossing the screen here. And so it's important to make sure that you try to get as much data as possible to help with that decision, and line yourself up with someone that has that data available for you. Strip trials are okay. Coffee talk is okay. But what you want to try to look at, I'm a science-based decision maker. So having replicated trials is, in my opinion, one of the best avenues to move forward. And these are some of the things, of course, that you want to take a look at, and each variety may have different characteristics or traits for this. So yield, of course, is the king when it comes to grain, CBD, or fiber. So that's of course the top of the list. Height, if you're harvesting for grain, you want a variety that is going to be competitive on the weed spectrum, but not too tall to cause you harvest issues. And we'll take a look at some equipment issues after that. Disease susceptibility is another one that is changes and is different for each different variety. Herbicide tolerance, there is an organic market. There is also some and particularly in Canada, we do have some options for herbicides to assist in keeping that crop clean. There's differences in maturity, shelling, and if you are on the CBD side, on cannabinoid content. Photoperiod sensitive, what does that actually mean? It means it's long day plants like peas, which flower when the days are longer, short day plants. Phototropic hemp is a phototropic. So basically what it says in a nutshell is when the days start to get shorter at summer solstice, that's when hemp will decide to start its reproductive cycle. So it doesn't matter how much biomass it's put on prior to or when it was seeded, when it starts to detect that, it's going to go into its flowering stage. So the lower in latitude and the day length and the day length or daylight intensity all has effect on growth. Heat units does also, but not as much as the day length. We won't really touch on feminized seed too much unless we have some questions after, but you can see on the left-hand side is a typical industrial hemp for either grain or fiber stature. And on the right-hand side, those are feminized seeds that are, of course, much bushier. I consider the one on the left more, I call it more of a palm tree effect, and these are more like Christmas trees. So just to give you an idea on the difference. This is just a picture of one of our feminized autoflowers, and the autoflower trait, if incorporated into industrial hemp, it will mature not necessarily on that day length, but it will mature on if you plant it on this day, then it's definitely going to mature 65 days later than that. So it's a little bit more structured, but there's some feminized plants, autoflower, not a lot for grain or fiber autoflower at this point in time. Mentioned the Health Canada list of approved cultivars. It's a busy, but it just shows you the amount and the difference of the different varieties that are out there. Canada has their own breeding program. Our company has its own breeding program, so a lot of ours are around there. But you can see that early on, we got a lot of these varieties from Europe, where hemp was legalized before, from Eastern Europe, so Italy, France, Ukraine. So yeah, that's just gives you kind of an idea of the differences for each of the different varieties. And there's probably 5 or 6 that are really the top varieties that are sold in Canada. When it comes to seeding, you want to make sure that first of all that you have a nice warm soil. To accomplish that too, you want to seed shallow. You don't want to put hemp seed too deep because it just doesn't have the vigor to break through, say, crusting or through a lot of depth if it's compacted too much or has a little bit too much clay in it. So, you know, that 3/4 of an inch, if there happens to be moisture there, then you're set. If it's irrigated, you can work that after the fact, but on dry land, try not to seed to moisture, because sometimes that moisture might be 1.5 to 2 inches deep. If you are seeding any other crops such as wheat, fava beans, peas, you can seed to that depth so that you can actually start that germination process. With hemp, we've seen more often than not that just causes problems. The mortality increases quite a bit. There just isn't enough vigor in that hemp seed to break that soil surface. So try to keep it at that 3/4 of an inch is what we would recommend. And again, seeding into warm soils. Taking advantage of that photoperiod sensitivity, you can wait and seed hemp later in the season. So as an example, where I am in Manitoba, we not very often will get seed in the ground at the end of April. So beginning of May kind of is we start off with our legumes, and then our cereals after that. We'll put canola in and soybeans, and then at the very end is when we seed our hemp. So seeding date for us is in a range of anywhere from about May 20th to the end of the first week of June. And something that I would suggest a lot of the research to be done in Idaho is to find that sweet spot for when to plant hemp there also. And this is in Celsius, this thermometer, but at 15 degrees or 17 degrees Celsius, we're looking at about 52 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit for a soil temperature. And that allows hemp to have the ability to absorb that moisture, that warm moisture, and then get started growing as quickly as possible. And we will see hemp emerge about 3 to 4 days after seeding. So in those conditions, when it's best, it does pop out of the ground very quickly, and you can get going. When we talk about seeding rates on the industrial side for grain, anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds is our recommendation. 30 pounds, a little bit more if you're on organic side. You want a little bit more biomass there to help suppress weeds. 25 pounds for grain or less. Gives it the proper spacing, lets the seed heads get to a certain size, has the airflow so that you have lower disease issues also. So this is just a picture of our seeder from the farm here. This is an air seeder with pulling those 2 tanks behind us, our nitrogen source called anhydrous ammonia. The seed is in the middle in the tank. These manifolds where my pointer is showing, this is the first primary manifold, and it's air driven, thus called an air seeder. So an airflow pushes the seed into these tubes, and you want to make sure that the airflow is high enough to make sure that it gets through those tubes and doesn't start to plug. But you also want to make sure that it's not too high, because hemp has a very sensitive seed coat. You don't want it bouncing around in these secondary manifolds too much, and particularly if the wind is too high, it can actually smash in there and completely make it into mush. So the recommendation on air seeders is start off, do your 100-yard pass, take a look in those manifolds and make sure you're not making coffee in there, because that's what it'll look like. A hemp seed will just get smashed and has a huge effect on your germination. Disease issues, sclerotinia. Hemp is a host to both sclerotinia and botrytis, which is, there are a number of crops that are also hosts, including soybeans, canola for us. And we don't see in Manitoba and Western Canada per se, because of our relative humidity during the summer months, it's not a huge issue at this point in time. It is for our canola crops, but on hemp, we're only seeing about a 5% infection rate. But the issue is if you're processing hemp and making hemp hearts, you can see the sclerotia body in the middle picture, where if that happens to go, get broken apart, or if it stays intact and escapes the cleaning process and the processing, and you see this sclerotia body in your nice white bag of hemp hearts, it's an unsightly thing, and your mind automatically goes to either rodent excrement or something. Where we've all had sunflower seeds in the past that have sclerotia bodies in there, and you can, that little stick that looks in there and tastes very bitter, that's a sclerotia body. So not pleasant. It's not going to kill you, but it's just not pleasant. And as a food company, you'd be getting a lot of phone calls saying, hey, I've got mouse excrement in my hemp hearts, which is usually just sclerotia bodies. This is the botrytis. I think it's actually gray mold is what it's called, but that's what it'll look like in the field, where a certain part of the seed head gets infected and gets moldy. It doesn't necessarily all the time kill the whole head, but it can. And you can see in this picture, this was a single plant in a range of a number of plants that were not infected. So again, infection rate and severity is usually somewhat limited, but as we continue to increase acres of hemp and the disease cycle, it is susceptible and just should be looked at as a potential issue down the road. Insects also love hemp. There's a lot of biomass there. The worm, which is a Bertha armyworm, and the grasshopper are foliage-eating insects. And hemp has a tremendous amount of biomass. I think probably in the Montana area, you might have some issues with grasshoppers occasionally too, and perhaps Idaho. But generally speaking, there's enough biomass there that they don't there isn't an economic threshold where you have to spray the crop to kill them. There's enough biomass that they'll just kind of hop away and not have a huge effect or any effect on yield for grain. The one on the right is a different story. That's the European corn borer. So that's one that should be looked at where there's more corn grown. Again, Canada is not a heavy corn growing region. So this was just by luck. I found this one insect at this point in time, but that's about the only one that I've seen up here. But it should be noted that insects can cause problems. I guess the other one that I don't have on here that should be noted is cutworms. Hemp loves cutworms. Cutworms are a worm that it stays in the soil. They only come out and feed at night. If you see some of the plants just lying in the ground, cut off at the stem or the root, dig down in there, and if you come up with this worm, that's what your problem is, and they will decimate a field if not looked after. Weed control, a big issue again, and the other pet peeve I have is that hemp will kill weeds, and if you have a dirty field, just plant hemp in it and it'll take care of the weeds. Well, you can see from this picture alone, this hemp plant There's a lot of pigweed in here. There's a lot of other weeds that are going to overtake or suppress the hemp in this case. If weeds can be controlled, depending on, there's different methods that you can do that. You want to have a quick canopy closure, so that's where hemp will have an advantage on weeds, where it will suppress the sunlight coming in, and that suppresses the weeds. So the first 4 to 6 weeks of hemp's growth, before you get that canopy closure, weed control is quite important. One way or the other, whether you're an organic grower or a conventional grower, you have to control those weeds. And there's camera mounted cultivators with today's technology, and some tractors with RTK capability, meaning guidance that you can be accurate to within an inch year to year on passes, and this camera detects where that row is, and will move the cultivator from left to right so that it's not doing any damage to the actual crop. It's just looking at staying. So you don't have to be the perfect driver. You can let technology help you with that. This is what I mean. This crop here is an organic crop of a variety of ours called Katani in northern Saskatchewan. This is about, I would say, the 3rd week of June, 4th week of June. We're almost at canopy closure there. This field is well on its way to being able to control weeds looking like this. This is on 15-inch row spacing to give you an idea, but once it gets to that stage, it's much more, it'll handle moisture more. It starts to be the beast that we know it can be. So that's the goal, is to get to that stage. Not going to spend a lot of time on here because these are just the minor use pesticides that are available for hemp in Canada. I do sit on or work with IR4, which is a collaboration between Canadian and American minor use registrations. And so we share information back and forth. So some of these are being put forward for minor use registration in the US also right now. Frost doesn't seem to be a major deterrent to hemp also. So even though we suggest seeding later, it's not because of frost, it's more because of mortality within the seed. So once the seed is in the ground and it's up, this was a frost, minus 4.7 Celsius is about 28 degrees Fahrenheit over about a 4-hour period in May in 2015. Did not kill the crop, it yellowed it, stressed it, but was able to rebound quite rapidly. Whereas our soybeans, flax, other crops had to be reseeded at that point in time. So it's fairly tolerant to a spring frost and really to a fall frost. This is just an example of a plant that did go through a bit of a fall frost. You can see the leaf material, those sugar leaves as they're called, are dried up and crispy. You want that with regard to looking at maturity. This is a good indicator here. So when you can see that the bract material that's protecting the seed starts to pull back and the seed is exposed. This is a really good example where my pointer is in the bottom right of this plant here, where that seed is just sitting there. Now it's a good indicator that this plant right here probably has a seed moisture of under 20%, probably in that 13 to 15% range. And it will mature from the stalk outward. So the seeds at the tip of the plant or at the tip of the buds are still going to have that bract material. So when 75% of those seeds are exposed, means that you're very close to having close to harvest time. The unfortunate part is the birds see that, and that's a prime time for them to come in there. And that's a good indicator of when you're getting close to harvest, is when you start to see mourning doves or blackbirds or others start to swoop down into your crop. Start taking a look, because you're probably close to getting there for harvest. We like to try to time our harvest anywhere between 10 to 20% seed moisture, and we'll go over the reason why. And I'll just state that the stalk still has active pectin and lignin holding the fibers together. So then we don't have that stalk exploding in the combine and starting to wrap on all the components. And so it's easier. There's less wrapping issues if you harvest at a higher moisture. The challenge is of course drying that crop down to below 10% seed moisture, so that we don't incorporate sort of what's called the standard plate count or microbiology that starts to have an effect on the seed quality. Because there isn't a kill step in processing hemp into hemp hearts, the quality again has to start at the farm. So it's very important to know that. It's deceiving. This is a picture from my cab 2 years ago, I guess it was. No, this is last year. And this crop is at about 13% seed moisture. I'm straight cutting it, then go straight into the truck, and then where our aeration bins and stuff is just down the road. Hemp can be swathed also and picked up, but this is more for areas that are going to have wind issues. Going back to that seed being outside of that seed bract and kind of just sitting there, if there's any major wind event and those large seed heads start banging against each other, you could have an excess of shelling. So you could lose a lot of pounds. And so a way to combat that is to swath it while it's still a little bit immature, and put it in a windrow and then pick that up. But really 4 to 5 feet tall is about as tall of a crop that you want to try to do that. Anything taller, and it's really recommended that you straight cut it, because pulling this amount of material into a combine can cause issues with wrapping. And that's the wrapping that I'm talking about. So this is on my John Deere combine. Initially, this is the drive shaft plenum. It's just a corrugated spline where it's got a little bit of a rough edge. So of course, the first straw starts to wrap on that and then invites all of its friends along, and you get this big buildup. And so once you have a full hopper, 3/4 of a hopper, it's a very good idea to walk around your combine just to see if you have a buildup of straw anywhere. Over time, you can see this start to cause some major issues. What we did in Canada to alleviate that is this using PVC pipe and some good old-fashioned duct tape, and putting that on over top of that shaft where you can remove it if you needed to work on it. But at the same time, hemp does not have the ability. It's too smooth. It's not really fixed, and so that's not spinning, and hemp doesn't have the ability. So just some modern modifications to a combine, to a regular combine, and you can get by with some of these issues. This is on the inside of the combine. Once the straw comes off the rotor onto this beater, you can see the shaft on that beater. It's starting to wrap around there. That can take out a bearing. If what we did there is just put some baling belt and tried to keep everything the same size, to keep everything in equilibrium and in balance, and it swipes the side of the combine wall, and it frees up that there's no longer an issue with that straw wrapping on that shaft. Always have some fire suppression if you're harvesting for grain or baling or anything. Again, that wrapping, if it gets on a shaft, it starts to heat up. It will ignite and it will start a fire. So this is a small, well, it's 20 gallons at least to start on the back of my combine. I didn't win it. I had to buy it. I did put my name in, but we also have some large water volumes nearby in the field to make sure that if there's any issues, we can put that fire out quickly. Testing the grain is important too, knowing what the moisture is. This is one of the most common moisture testers for grain in Canada. Labtronics model 919. You can get the chart from the Canadian Grain Commission that has the hemp. So basically, you take a look at where you dial in, where the dial on top bottoms out, gives you a number in the bottom right-hand corner. You cross-reference that with the temperature of the grain, and it gives you the seed moisture very accurately. So it's very important to do that because you want to make sure you know what's happening in that bin at all times. So when we get to storage and handling, again, this is a very important part. You want to make sure that you clean your harvest and handling equipment, because you're working on a food product, again, that does not have a lot of ways to kill any micronutrients or take that. So just imagine that it goes from your bin to a seed cleaner, to the processor, and to the consumer's plate. There isn't a kill stop in there that's going to kill that. So, eliminating any opportunity for rodents and other pests to be, to have excrement on there is very important. To take that extra. It's not like wheat where it's going to get blended off and other aspects. It's just a different crop to work with. You remember that you're working with a raw food product. So, and making sure that you know what your bin is doing again. You can have moisture cables within that bin to determine whether there's any problems there. And these are the things that are looked at by processors. And so the peroxide value gives you an indication of whether that seed coat has been compromised. If the peroxide value is higher than 4 mecq per kilogram, essentially that tells you that there's a strong possibility that seed can get rancid. That means oxygen's getting into the meat of that seed. And if you ever are tasting either hemp seed oil or hemp hearts, you should have a nice buttery kind of nutty taste to it. It should not be bitter at all. If it's bitter, there's a good chance that it's been dated and could be rancid. And when we're trying to promote this as an industry, the last thing we want are people to be turned off by the taste of hemp. It should be appealing to most, and we want to make sure that is maintained. So selling to a processor, they're going to look at peroxide value, the standard plate count, and all of these scary looking words essentially mean that we don't want anybody getting sick from the product. And so very important also, and there are requirements that have to be met when selling to a food processor. And if they fall outside of that, there's little way to bring it back in for food quality, so it would have to be sold. And the current market for hemp grain that doesn't make food quality is for bird seed. I know Montana, there's other states, Texas is looking at it as a feed value for animal livestock, which could work, but we're not there yet.
Can I step in for a second?
Sure thing.
On that, Texas and Kentucky actually both approved them for hemp oil and hemp meal for chickens and horses. So you can feed it to chickens and horses both in those states. And I know that we are working with the Feed Coalition and trying to get it federally approved. And now that a couple states are on board, I think that'll help speed that up a little quicker. So
thanks, Dalton. Yeah, and the Feed Coalition is again made up of both Canadian and American companies and interests to try to get those regulations changed. And it's a very important aspect because we have to maintain value for a farmer. He can't just have to dump it in a pit and not have a use for it.
And if I could just quickly clarify, since we have various scales of growers, and correct me if I'm wrong, so it's not approved federally for animal feed, which could create problems for producers that have insurance policies, correct?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue, and they don't want it to go into a commercial food chain in Canada. And I don't know, Dalton, maybe you can tell me, but in Canada, if you had your own heifer or your own steer that you were feeding at your farm and you consumed it yourself, there's no illegality to that, but it can't go into the marketplace because CFIA, in our case, hasn't done enough testing to feel that it's safe. But we can eat it for sure as humans. There's just a concern there.
yeah, and it's the same for here in the States, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for clarifying. Thank you.
So this is just a picture of some of the infrastructure that we have at the farm. And again, in the canola industry, pretty well every farm that grows canola in Canada have these hopper bottom bins where it makes it very easy. You just put your conveyor or auger underneath there, open up you don't have to shovel the bottom of it. And with these aeration fans, each one of these bins has this aeration fan that pushes the air, up from the bottom through to the top, pushing the moisture of grain out of there. So if you're in the teens, 13, 14% moisture over time, and moving it. By moving it, I mean emptying this bin and then filling it back up again. You're able to sort of mix that grain and get it dried down that way. We also use grain dryers. The idea again for all of this is low and slow. There is toasted hemp out there, but you want the processors to toast it. You don't want to toast it at home. Otherwise, they will dock you for that. And again, this bacterial and mold growth, time, temperature, and moisture are the three components that have an effect on that. Temperature, is basically your ambient temperature unless you're using a dryer. Moisture is basically depicted at the time of harvest, and then time. So the time is what we have the most influence on. So making sure that we can reduce that moisture through as quick as possible, i.e. time, the better off we are to maintaining a good quality product. So just a little bit on the different machines that are out there. This is a European model that is basically doing a number of aspects of grain harvest. At the bottom, you can see it is being windrowed. So the top header cuts just the seed heads off. That runs through the combine. The grain is collected in the tank. The flour or the chaff material is collected in this wagon behind. So if there was any CBD component to that crop, that could be processed. In this case, in Europe, they do have the ability to feed it there. So that's likely what the case is here. You don't need to have a combine like that. Just a regular conventional combine will work. You just have multiple passes. So you would have to come back and windrow the stalks that are left over if your header is this high. This is another very expensive machine that comes out of Europe called Dunagro. It's a very short crop here, but this is a stripper header. Removes all the leaves, and you can see it and the seed, and it's flying into the back of this hopper that is unloaded into wagons, and it is either processed or utilized that way. There is no separation. There is no separation between the seed material and the leaf material here, but it does windrow the stalks after the fact so that it can be baled. Very quickly on some fiber stuff here. When looking at harvesting for fiber, first of all, this picture here, you see that's not smoke, that's the pollen that's being dispersed, I guess, from the plants as it's being cut down. This is just with a straight sickle. It can be used, a swather can be used. If it's too much volume, then you would probably have to go with a disc bind to put it in a windrow. There are also multi-cut operations where, if you can imagine, if I go back to this, if you have a very tall crop and try to run that through a baler, if it's a 10 to 15 foot tall plant, once it starts going into the baler, you just cannot stop it from coming in. So the processors and the manufacturers don't want 10 foot of fiber. They maybe want 24 inches or what have you. So a multi-cut puts it into different sections, into a windrow, and then you can bale that way. The retting process is something I think we need to still learn a lot about. Dalton and I were talking a little bit about that. Winter retting, in this case, this was just a sickle bar on the left-hand side, and then a hay rake, sort of a tedder rake, puts it into a windrow once it's dry. The issue here again is that tedder rake will, if you have any stones, will bring stones into that. When the processor picks up that bale or is trying to unravel that bale, sometimes they will use a bale buster, like a hay buster, and a stone in there can cause fires, and it has caused fires. There's a plant in Manitoba here that burned about 300 bales as they were processing. So there's different ways that we need to figure out, I think, a proper retting process, reducing risk for both processors and farmers alike. But obviously can be baled, making sure that same thing, checking your rollers, all bearings, so you're not getting a bunch of wrapping, because at this dry product, it is very combustible and it can cause some issues. So with that, this is just one of the pictures I had from my cab with a full moon. It was a harvest moon a couple of years ago, and I kind of say that this could be the light at the end of the tunnel. I think hemp's gone through a lot of ups and downs. Hopefully that light at the end of the tunnel isn't the train coming at us, and that we still maintain having a lot of opportunity with this crop. So that's the company that I work for. Again, we have varieties that are suited for Idaho. Not all varieties are suited for Idaho. Not all varieties are suited for all three aspects of the industry. So make sure Dalton is an agronomist with Hemp, a good person to talk to also. But make sure you line yourself up with someone that has some knowledge and can work with you to make sure that you're as you mitigate your risk and you're as successful as possible. We offer that. A lot of the processors do, and that's the take-home message. This isn't just a message for our company. It's more of just making sure we're trying to get this industry moving in the right direction. So I'm going to stop sharing. Where are we at for time? I have some limited time, but if there's some questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Jeff. I know there's other people on the call that may have points to add, but first, if there's any questions, go ahead and have a little bit of discussion based on what we just heard.
Hey, Jeff, how expensive is that Krone, that stripper header, that whole system? How much is that?
$2 million. For
$2 million.
$2 million.
Yeah.
There is a company in Canada that's where I took that picture. Is they do have two of those. The aspect there, the thought process was, the feminized seed is going to have, you can get CBD values of 10 to 15%, still remain under that 0.3%. They're not well suited for that type of a stripper header. That's just too much biomass. But some of our varieties can contain up to 5% CBD, still be able to produce 1,000 pounds of grain and then have some fiber. So as a tri-crop, that machine is kind of attractive. Mind you, you still have to separate the seed out of that. But that's what that was for, is either for the feed industry or just stripping the leaves off hemp. So
yeah,
pretty pricey.
Yeah, I've got a Shellborn and I've wanted to try it on some hemp grain, but I didn't know. God, it looks like it'd be really hard on them shark tooths on that Shellborn.
Yeah, when we first got it too, that was the first thing. There was a couple guys with straight cut headers back in the early 2000s, and I mean they just made that thing a big joint. So timing is everything with this crop. So if it's still, maybe when it's still green like that, again, those fibers aren't able to detach as much, so it will do that. But you get later in the season, trying to harvest for grain, particularly on a dioecious crop. And a dioecious crop for hemp means it has a male plant and a female plant.
Mm-hmm.
Just like us in real life, the males tend to get out there and then die off early, and the women do the rest of the work, the females. And so those dead males in a dioecious crop are what can cause more of the wrapping issues. So
do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
On a Raider combine, not a big deal. And what we're working on is for a plug for our seed company is what are called different states of hybrid hemp. And I don't mean hybrid by being grain and fiber. I mean hybrid production or hybrid seeds, so that we can control the female and the male population. So we have unisex hybrids. So where we're, right now, just like Mother Nature takes care of both. So there's about 50% male, 50% female on the average. Whether it's a dioecious crop or a monoecious crop, a dioecious crop will have 50% male plants, 50% female plants. A monoecious crop will have 50% of the seed head is male, 50% is female. So what we're going to be able to do with this hybrid production is limit that. We don't need 50% of the males to pollinate this crop. Maybe 5% to properly pollinate the crop for seed production. And so
that'll easier then. If you can get to 5 to 10% males, then that's just gonna make your harvest that much easier.
The harvest is easier, and then you should automatically have a yield bump. Those males aren't producing any seed. They're eating all the groceries, taking up the moisture on the couch, but providing nothing more than just the reproductive method for society. So
Jeff, when will you have that dialed in? When do you think, how long will it take for you guys to get
we're
that
gonna
dialed
have.
in?
We feel we have it dialed in now. Where that seed is being produced in growth chambers and nurseries right now. So we'll have enough seed for probably about 5 replicated trial production sites in Canada. So Alberta will have a site if anybody's interested in coming to take a look at those varieties. We'll have them compared to open pollinated varieties. Our early indicator on a true F1 hybrid, we've seen the early indicator is yields on the open pollinated where they're 1,500 pounds. We've been able to see 4,800 to 5,000 pounds of grain on an F1 hybrid. And so now it's just a matter of ramping that up, ground proofing it, and then working the agronomy into that. So with that,
4,500 pounds, Jeff, 4,500 pounds is your potential?
Yeah, definitely 2x yield is what we kind of is our minimum, but we are hoping for a little bit better than that.
Yeah. Boy, when you hit that target, man, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be grain prices right now. What I guess just to be frank, farmers in Canada, they're looking for anywhere between $800 to $1,000 per acre as a revenue. Now, every area is different, but our canola will pull that. So we, as a hemp, we have to compete with that. With that, we're still, if we double the yield, it's not necessarily going to mean immediately that farmers will get that because it's automatically the goal in the hemp industry is to have hemp parts available to every consumer. Not right now, it's probably a little bit too high end, priced on the high end side. The nutritional benefits and everything are great, but they're not that great. They're not 4x great, right? There's an advantage to having it, but we for the industry to grow and to get it into the hands of more consumers, we have to kind of lower that cost of goods. So this is a step in that direction that we feel will happen with the industry.
I agree with that 100%. And where I'm at, Jeff, if guys are making their contract in potato ground for $1,600 cash rent for potato ground, and the corn, they're getting 30-ton corn and they're getting $60 a ton for it. So we're at that $1,800 range, and it's hard. And you just can't get anybody to jump on board on hemp grain right now.
Yeah, and that's true. Yeah, I mean if we can incorporate and Dalton's again involved with the fiber industry. So if we can get that grain, to bring in that $1,000 to $1,500 an acre, get an extra $200-300 on that fiber. You're not producing high quality fiber if you're dual purpose farming hemp, right? If you want to go textile, there might be an opportunity for that, to grow and you take seed out of your mind completely and you manage that crop.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the challenge there. But I mean, yeah, it's possible. The more the industry grows as a whole, the fiber, the grain combined together, it's possible to get there, Tim, I think.
The other question that I kind of want to, and I hope you know this information, we have a lot of dairies that are salt overloading and phosphate or high in phosphates. And so do you think that the fiber side, if not for the grain side, but just planting fiber in that nitrogen it's just phosphate and salt levels too high. Do you think that hemp fiber could be an amendment to help pull the salts?
To a certain degree, absolutely. It is salt sensitive. So we don't, when we're placing fertilizer with our seed, the nitrogen is placed away from it for sure. We will go up to 25 pounds of actual P2O5 with the seed. There's a slight mortality there, but the yield increase outweighs that. So it is a high phosphate user. So for that matter alone, so on for hog manure fields, I mean, that was our best crop ever, was on a on a hog manure field where we had, almost irrigated, it was dry land, but the rainfall was almost an irrigation situation. And we were able to harvest, the crop came in at just under 2,000 pounds, clean and dry. So the genetic potential is there, Tim. It's just a matter of Mother Nature. And as we work towards even this hybrid vigor part of things, we're going to see less mortality. So seeding rates will go down. So the total dollar return for the farmer, should increase overall for that. So,
well, some of these dairymen are going to have to actually do it just because, not even has to be for grain, but just for the fiber, because if their salt levels, because they're letting the whole manure closer, they're overloading the phosphates.
Yeah.
They are overloading, the salt levels are too high. They're almost sterilizing that ground. And I'm wondering if the fiber side would be a solution for them to meet their nutrient requirements, to get that ground back together. And I don't know what that'll do with salts. I don't know if that would pull it into that fiber and help get rid of it. I don't know.
Well, salts, generally speaking, it's a moisture issue too. So, that's what's going to bring salts will get leached down with moisture, but as it dries up, that's what brings them to the surface, and that's what kind of starts to screw up that soil. So, on the phosphate side of things, like the P2O5, again, hemp will take quite a bit of that if you can, and it'll take that off the field for you and utilize it. So most farms conventionally without manure, that's a big issue, right? A good part of my fields are under 10 ppm. For phosphate levels, I'm trying to build that phosphate level up. So, everything is a little bit different, but hemp is one of the things. So we got to be careful because following a canola crop is a heavy phosphate user, pulses are, and hemp will be. So we got 3 crops in the rotation that are going to use a lot of phosphate, and that's what would kind of help that out.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. Yeah. I hope I kind of covered off for the most part. And again, it's not my duty to scare anybody from the crop. I think there's opportunity, but you can't go in with your eyes closed. Make sure that you align yourself. Christy, thanks so much for putting this together and the ability. Let's get some trials in Idaho, see how the crop grows in there. Unfortunately, a lot of the hemp companies in Canada, they need at least 80 acres as an experimental, so that to process that. So let's get the researchers involved to iron out some of the agronomy. I'm telling you things that kind of happen in my farm, and like everything that I've shared with you has been the school of hard knocks. Not I didn't pull those pictures off of the University of Google. So, but that's in my backyard. Let's try and figure out how best to do it in Idaho with what you have for infrastructure and climate and environment, and try to do that. So again, this is just a broad way of saying, okay, this is what we need to look for, but there's certainly could be other issues specific or opportunities specific to Idaho. So that's the important thing, I think, the take-home message.
So, hey, Christy, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, is University of Idaho, we got the research farms in Kimberly and in different parts of the southern part of the state. Are they going to do any kind of test trials or plots? Are they working on anything of that nature?
That's a good question. So our last stakeholder meeting was more research focused, and we brought in some researchers from other parts of the country as well. And the main contact so far has been Pamela out of the Aberdeen Research Center, and she was the first U of I researcher to have a license to grow. And we had registered for today's talk, so that indicates that a continued interest. There was interest in expanding funding and trying to diversify so that we could have some multi-year trials and whatnot. So definitely on the radar. I don't think that there's well-established grower connections. There are some relationships between extension and the Shoshone-Bannock hemp program. The tribal council supported 300 acres. And this recording will be sent out to them since they weren't able to make the call today. So that's just a little bit of an overview. But I think there's still a lot that can be done, both with supporting the researchers, but also getting them connected with you growers. So, yeah.
So Jeff, if we were to get you with our plant or our university test trial plots, because they've got the ground and they've got the technology to all small acres, would want us to help you get connected to Southern Idaho?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's important for me. I don't want to sell seed to you guys that's gonna fail, right? Like it makes me a better agronomist. It makes I don't want to sell you 1 year's worth of seed. I'd like to sell you, continually and help develop. So yeah, 100%. There's also I know the University of Kentucky, Bob Pierce runs a multi-state trial. I don't know if Idaho is involved with that yet, but we do have some of our varieties involved with that to help me better understand. In all reality, our initial varieties were bred for Western Canada, and the lower we go in latitude, the more challenging it is. But that being said, again, this recent merger that we went through, we've got new products coming onto the portfolio all the time. There's 2 varieties that I'm very excited about that would work well in those lower latitudes. A variety called Indigo, another variety which is again a hybrid T3EH 2006. I would encourage you, if you would like a seed catalog, I can email you one. Christy would have my email address, and then also just go to verveseeds.com as our website to just kind of take a look. I think we try to do a very good job of indicating where our varieties will do. There's a map of the US there, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is get that testing done, Tim.
Yeah, where you have the genetic technology and the patent on it and all that, then I think the Kimberly Research Center would totally sign an agreement, and then that way we don't, we got to keep your integrity of your seed and your work and your expenses and all the money you've invested pure. And then if I can get you with those guys and we can put in some 5-10 acre lots for them to get some experience on, I think that'd be great. I'll just talk to the U of I research team there in Kimberly and see if it's something that we could put in the works.
Yeah.
And then Christy and you, Jeff, I'll put them.
Yeah. Please feel free to loop me in.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of RFPs coming out right now for organic research. So would love to get some organic trials, looking at how this could be integrated into different organic systems that are popular in the area.
Yeah.
Bikram asked for the email, so I did put it in the chat if anybody wants to. And that's our website. There's no space in there, but verveseeds.com. Anyhow, yeah, that's kind of what I had. I've got another call in about 5 minutes here, but really appreciate the time to spend with you guys, and it's always nice getting to see people in person and be able to interact that way too. But this is a very economical way that we can get a bunch of people in from a wide range of areas. So again, appreciate that, and yeah, reach out anytime.
Thank you, Jeff.
So much again, Jeff. And just if we are interested, if Idaho stakeholders or people involved in the group today are interested in getting together in person, we do have some funds that could be used for that. But we're starting off slow, just getting our feet wet. Going into the second season, we'll see how interest and capacity grows for something like that. Wanted to put that out to the room.
Anybody's coming up to Canada to vacation, and I don't expect it in the wintertime, but in the summertime, we'll have these performance trials. Be more than happy to let you know where they are, spend some time with you just to show those things. And yeah, Tim, you're as before, you're always welcome to come up this summer and take a look and come to the farm. And
yeah, I'm pretty
sure headphones on it too.
I'm gonna drive up and see you for sure, Jeff.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks very much. I'll leave you guys. If there's more Idaho specific stuff, or again, if there's anything that's needed from me, you can. But unfortunately, I gotta leave right now, but I really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
See you, Jeff.
All right,
Thanks,
take
Ken.
care.
Cool. Since this is going to be sent out to folks who weren't able to join the call today, if there's anything else, Dalton, Tim, or any of the interested growers, Maddie wasn't able to join. Maddie from Hemp wasn't able to join today. But if anyone has an update on where they're at, this might be a useful way
Yeah.
to.
I was at the grand opening the other day.
Yeah.
And they really good turnout, and they did a phenomenal job presenting their business, and they had a lot of people from around the state. Great connections. I'm glad I went. Met some wonderful people from the Idaho Commission that was there, and so the more I think about it, when I see some of these dairies really struggling with the overload of phosphate, nitrates, and the salts and whatever, and that HEMP texture, I can see the fiber side, not the grain side, but I see that fiber side being a really good tool for some of these dairymen to take up a lot of their, I just like
Excess.
to see trials done as to handle that overload that they're dealing. Some of that ground is losing its fertility because the salt levels are getting high and overloading it. And I just think it might be a tool to clean that ground up and get it reset. And I don't know if that's true or not without studies.
So I can tell you, yes, it is. Whether it's heavy metals, your salts, whatever you're doing, that plant is uptaking it. And it will clean your soils up. We're looking at it for phytoremediation. We own a Superfund site, and we're looking at cleaning it up with that. We've shown it in Idaho down at a tailings mine, taking boatloads amount of arsenic and lead out of the soil. So we've also done a little studies in here in some saline seeps just to see if it could grow, within those. And as long as you can get the ground dry enough to get it to come out of the ground, that's the problem with those seeps, it just stays wet so long. But it will grow within that and take some of that salt out of the ground. So where you're going with that, it 100% would be beneficial to them. Now, if they could get it to not only take it out of the ground, but then be able to use it as a feed source, like a silage, and not have to worry about those nitrates and all that stuff, that would be great. But I don't know if that's capable.
I see it working as a fiber for the wool deal because it's not being consumed. All that's stuck into that fiber, and then, being used as maybe a paste down the road. I don't know if it's true. I was told that University of Idaho was making a lime water fiber paste and doing some 3D printing for some building with it. And so I just think that, not on the edible side with the hybrid between the grain and the fiber, but I think just as a fiber plant, that could be a big deal for these dairies that are having some major issues because they just don't want to haul that manure that fall because of the cost, and they've overloaded in some areas. And I think if that data was available, this is something that needs to be presented to the Dairy Commission. Christy, what do you think?
I think that's a really interesting idea. And I'm going to be meeting with Linda. I believe she's out of the new CAFO research, Cafe Research Center, Soil Health Department. So yeah, I'll flag it with her. I think having them on board would be really useful since that new research center was put in with money for sustainable dairy.
Yeah, that would be a great, if they could just put it on just one of their farms they know they got a problem with and be able to add in some trials and see what happens. One of the things I do see that could be potentially a problem is some of that fiber gets so tall that, will the pivots walk through that fiber without any issues?
So that's something, we've had it all the way 15-foot tall stuff, and it doesn't affect it whatsoever. The plants, and the plants don't fall over, and the pivot can get across it too. So,
and that's a win-win. This is a no-brainer.
Yeah. I will say it doesn't it is lodging. A lot of people worry about that when it gets such a tall crop. the stuff, unless you have like 120-mile-an-hour flatline wind, it's not going to fall over. I would almost guarantee you that. So
How with that being so tall and massive, does Maddie have how are they going to knock that down in windrow and run it through and bale it when it's that big? How are they going to handle it when it gets to that fiber side? When it's 20
so we just like 1940s, think of that sickle mower.
Oh,
Lay
makes
it,
sense.
cut it 4 inches off the ground. You just lay it flat. Now you come in and windrow it. Rotary rake is what you have to use. You can't use a basket rake or a wheel rake. That will not work, and you'll just cuss yourself if you try. So I would not recommend it. And then you just come in and bale it up.
They're round baling it?
Yep, round or square, either one. Now, granted, if you could size that material, into 24-inch pieces, or, shorten it up some, so you're not just having a 10 to 13-foot stalk, or whatever. That definitely helps with the efficiency and being able to use different modes of equipment, rakes specifically is what I'm meaning. Because that material is short, it doesn't have the ability to wrap around the whole mechanism.
Mhm.
So it doesn't, you can use that. It doesn't wrap up on it. And then, so we're looking into, Jeff had showed it. We do our own custom harvesting at IND Hemp. We grow fiber and grain both. So we have our own custom crews, and we're getting 2 of those hemp cutters, the ones that were staged that had like 4 sickles on it. We're purchasing 2 of those for our operation this year. And that's how kind of we manage the fiber hemp. I don't, if it was 20 foot tall, it'd still be fine.
That's good. Did you take over Ben's position?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked with Ben, and he came down and looked at our stuff. And what's your name?
Dalton Whitmer. I'm from Indiana.
Dalton.
So yeah.
And where do you live at?
Fort Benton, Montana.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're tough as nails.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm a Purdue grad, agronomy, plant and soil science, from Indiana. And I just came out here to try this stuff out, see what it's about, and kind of get away a little bit from home, spread my wings. So
no, it's good. And that's, and I'll tell you what, Morgan, you guys have got a great team. Steve over
he's
in Boston,
awesome, ain't he? Yeah.
that bitch is sharp. I mean, sharp. Greg, those you got, and Morgan, and I mean, you guys got a hell of a team, and I'm proud of what you guys have accomplished. It's not been an easy road.
No, it's still not easy yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So
yeah. So
the bricks are finally starting to turn a little bit into asphalt. That's how I'll say it.
That's where we are as our company. Well, Thousand Springs, we're organic, but I just I was at that meeting, and Greg and Steve were there too. We went and had dinner, and when I was just impressed with what Maddie's accomplished and the investment they put in there, location wise, I think is going to be really good because he's right by the interstate. And I do believe these dairies, I think if these trials turn out to be what I think they will, that's going to be a huge win for the rivers, because that nitrates overloads and the phosphates are showing up in the river water. And if this will make that ground fertile again and help suck that up, this could be one of those nutrient management plans that they're going to have to implement. They'll be part of their nutrient management plan. And that'll make it a win-win for not only the local water source, but also the dairies and everybody. And it's good for Maddie. I think this is a win situation.
I think, if you're looking at it for that, I would definitely look into maybe using it as a cover crop, potentially. That's kind of the way I look at it. Granted, I don't know where you're at in Idaho, because you're in Idaho, right?
Yeah, it's a cool idea.
I don't know timeline to do what it needs to do.
That's my thing. I didn't know where you're at in Idaho, if you could manage that. So
Plan it in May, and that is their soil amendment to that farm.
yeah,
they're not sacrificing because they're filling Maddie with fiber for the hemp industry. So that ground gets a year out of, because what they're doing is they're putting in I mean, they make it this way, I'm putting in triticale and then we're chopping that and we go and plant corn and we chop that and then they go back to triticale and they go this back and forth. And they are pulling, some of that out. But if the salts are still there because of the overload of manure.
Yep.
And I think if it does pull those others out and it does pull the salts out, and it may be a hell of a crop for these guys, and it may be something that they need to do. I don't know, but I don't know
Maybe
anything.
starting with the ones that are most affected.
Yes, they need. The county knows which ones are got some big issues. They're like, okay, we got we're not putting more manure here for another 5 years because of this. Then that's the test trial that needs to happen.
Well, yeah, maybe it's something, it needs to be talked at the state level with those, I guess, ears that need to hear it, and see if that's potential that is a funded research thing through the state for a cleanup project. Or, I don't know if there's anything along those lines that they do, but that's something maybe to run by them.
Yeah, it does make me think about some of my partners in other states that are able to get state funding allocated. And I know that there's been some new pots of funding established for climate smart or, climate friendly.
The milk industry has a lot of money, and those guys, if they need funding to help them, they got it. So I'm pretty sure the money's there for it.
Yeah.
I think the Idaho Dairy Commission, somehow you need to be in communication with them, and then where I'm in Boise a little bit. If you want me to, I'd be glad to talk to the right person there and talk to the research side of things as well.
Yeah. Having you as someone who's grown it, who is also a member on the member of the industry on the processing side, I think you're going to be, even if it is grain versus fiber, you, Maddie, Pamela, some other, Linda. Yeah, I think, and getting some conventional growers that are struggling with those nutrient management challenges.
So
I personally would not want it as a grain for me because I don't want to put that shit in human food because of
Totally.
the copper level.
Having your perspective.
Yeah, the foot house and everything those cattle are put into, and some of those chemical overloads are on that ground. And I think this right here is a cleanup. I'm excited for the dairymen to have an option to help that ground.
Those nutrient management or nitrate problem areas have been well documented. So I think bringing in those stakeholders and doing some bridge building and hemp. That's the fact that hemp can uptake heavy metals was the main motivator for why
it's good and bad is the way I look at it, because if you're talking food and it's uptaking it, is it transferring it to the seed? Well, then that ain't no good.
Right.
And that's something that we have seen. Now the levels are like, parts per billion, of course, and we've only ever seen it 1 part per billion above the threshold. And I don't think it's something common. That's where you're going to have to dig a little bit agronomically and look at the soil. Well, pH is low. Well, that's going to enable those heavy metals to be uptaken. It's going to loosen them up in the soil. So I'm going to say it was probably more related to a pH issue in the grain side of it. Now the fiber side of it, I think it just does it. I think the plants they're just different between the way they grow and their method of uptaking nutrients and what they can uptake. I think it's just different within the anatomy of the plant.
I think when we're looking at hemp as a bioremediative tool, I think it would be useful to take a couple more steps down the certified seed path with the state so that we can have varieties that the testing requirements are, the testing thresholds are known and trusted. And so it removes some barriers for implementing the trials and whatnot, especially if it's well supported with a lot of collaborators at the table. And we know the acreage, and we're looking at it closely for the benefits. And I know that's something that ISDA is interested in. I don't know what their capacity for getting certified seed programs up and running I don't know what that looks like to date, but they have expressed interest in the past at the very beginning. So
Yeah, really interesting. I'm gonna put out some feelers with some big dairymen.
Back
It's got some
that
issues.
sounds great. Tim. Thank
back
you.
to your dairy thing. I will say, you know, you have to have somebody that can buy that material. And Hempatexture can't just buy the raw material. You know what I mean? They have to have a process.
We need
They
a
buy the
rudder.
processed.
We need some more processing.
So you're gonna, you know, if you're wanting to do that, I'm not trying to make this a sales pitch, but you can give them my information and they can reach out to me because we're looking, I mean, for acres in that area anyways. And we're the only processor around here that can put it into the material that Hempatexture needs. So
Oh, yeah, no, and I want some, I do. I want you guys to make a bunch of money.
Totally.
So more than glad to set that up. The only, you know, we even talked because we can load rail cars at our facility.
yep.
Because of logistics and travel, you know, costs or whatever. We're trying to figure out a way to, we can get it up there cheaper and back cheaper.
Yeah, that'd be huge.
Yeah, and you know, that would, rail is the one that makes sense.
You know, I know here in our town, they have a, it's an old one. It used to be up and running. They shut it down and it stops like 2.5 miles outside of town. And we're looking to get it brought back into town. I don't think where the rail is now, I think you'd have to do too much work and it costs way too much money to get it actually back into town. But we're looking into putting a little hub just up outside of town, bringing it a little bit closer. So it's only about a mile away from us, and building a little warehouse and whatnot there. So that was kind of the talks. I know they're working with BNSF on that, see where it goes, but I think it's
But Dalton, this is a future conversation, but just to get it started, what's your capacity? Like, are you looking at expanding? You know, could we potentially also be looking at expanding that primary processing even closer to us?
yeah. So, you know, their whole goal, you know, was to have you know, eventually they want to have one of these at each state line. I don't care where you're at, but they want to have one at every line. Now, granted, I don't think it'll ever get to that. I mean, that's a lot if you get to thinking about it. But, you know, they, in the next 2 to 5 years, they plan to have 2 more of these up and going. Now, granted, I can't tell you where. I do know that one of them is definitely of interest down in that area, especially with Hempatexture being there and there's good water availability and this and that. The other is in the Midwest. So those are the next 2 I know of that are in the works. Now, granted, where they go, how soon, I don't know, but they're definitely looking at it. And with the markets that are coming about, I would lean towards it'll definitely happen, I would say. So.
Yeah, I think I can see that being the Midwest. I know that they're going to start putting some moratoriums on the Okolala aquifer, and they're looking for some water saving crops because growing, you know, some high water usage crops, and you know, the Okolala aquifer has been pumped out of too hard, and they're going to, some people shut some wells down or limit their irrigation, you know, to so many days or so many, you know, gallons per minute, and that's it.
So my thing is, you know, Jeff was talking about retting, and that's one of the most crucial parts of the fiber production is the retting. And the reason I say Midwest is because it rains there. You don't have to worry about irrigation. You can go put it on dry land. It rains all the way all year long, every year. You know, you don't really worry about that. So the retting, you can speed it up. You can get better yields. You have longer growing season, and then you don't have to have the same. It's just easier retting, better environment for retting. You can get it done in, you know, less than a month. The whole aspect of it out here, we're lucky to get it done in a month and a half, 2 months.
Right.
Interesting.
So that's the big, I guess, the big push for that area. And then all the textile people, honestly, the majority of the people that are looking into the textile markets are all on the East Coast. So just logistics side of it, it works instead of being all the way out here, because I see where our products go, where they're shipped to, this and that. And I would say the majority of what we get and ship is east of the Mississippi.
Yes.
75%.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. But even if you did put something down here in Idaho, that's a straight line that if you hit that Bliss, that road there, that railroad on Bliss there, that's a straight shot to east west coast. That's a main line. And that makes a little bit of sense that if, and I mean, like I said, I don't know if, because we got so much shit going on, it's insane, but, if we could handle, the other site where we could, help you guys with the fiber side and be able to bring it in, baled, load it, haul it to you guys. And then it brings it back to Maddie on the rail.
Yep.
But if you would sometime expand where you put your other facility close to Idaho, but we can put it close to the rail site, then that right there is just a straight shot all the way to the East Coast. And if you expand to the point where you got to go to the Midwest some, then you can bail it and bring it in and ship it back and put it on those bigger rail cars. But I think putting it on that main line, straight south of me, about 25 miles, north of me, 25 miles, you're on that straight line from the either port.
Yeah.
And that would be probably a good place to be. I've got a location now that I think about it.
Well, you need to talk to Morgan. I'm not the one that makes that call.
Oh, well, I'll have to have some drink. Shit, but
I do know Idaho's of interest, especially with hemp texture being there 100%. I'm not going to, like I said, I don't know which one would be first, but those are the first two places they're looking to go.
Yeah.
So.
No. Well, and it does make sense if you could, unless you handle it, and if you had another facility, not that you got that one dialed in, and when you expand, the other one just by hemp texture does make sense.
And the reason why Indiana is more, is I think I had a little pull in that, honestly. I come from there. I come from a farming household. I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people of interest in it. And actually, we've contracted with some people back there. Last year, we are again this year, and especially with Dunn Agro coming on, they're looking to put same size facility as what we have here in north central Indiana. They're supposed to be done. It was supposed to be done at the end of 2023. I don't think it's going to be, because I don't think they've even started on it. But by the end of 2024, it should be there. So, and that was that group that Jeff had on there, that with that Jaguar, that Klaus Jaguar thing.
Oh,
yep.
They're a Dutch company. That's all I know. They've been doing it for like 29, 30 years. So they definitely have knowledge.
Yeah. So are you going to be working with those people then?
I'm not. No, I mean, maybe in the future. I can't say, I don't know where I'm going to be, but no, I plan to just stay here and work through IND just out there.
Yeah.
Now if they put one of these facilities here, then definitely I'll go back there. I mean, was my whole end goal in the anyways, was to get back in Indiana and kind of be the hemp guy back there. That was my whole idea. So
with you contracting in Indiana, are you bringing that stuff on rail to you guys then?
So this here, I should, we're contracting seed production. So this is just for seed production.
I see.
Yeah. Now it'd be way out of, we couldn't do it. It wouldn't work for a grain or a fiber crop. It's just too far away.
Right. Yes. Well, and yeah, I can see that. You got the humidity, you got the moisture, you got that does make sense.
Yeah.
You got the drying capabilities, everybody has the dryers and the full floor aeration. They have the equipment needed. It's not, you really don't have to change too much up. You just have to have the processors there. And there's boatloads of people interested everywhere across this country. It's just there's nowhere to take it. That's the problem. And it just costs too much, it's not developed enough that people are willing to take the risk of $10 million up front to build, or whatever it costs to build this facilities, and then, not have anywhere to take your product. That's a big risk to take, I believe. So,
Well, it is hard because when you build in a brand from zero and then you build everything, invest all that, it takes 3 or 4 years to build or, you can move some stuff. It takes time.
Yep. And we're finally getting some traction. That's the thing, it's promising. Just in the last 2 weeks, well, since, down there at the Hempitexture, I know a couple of the people within the company were down there, and just they made some connections there, and then a few other places, and it's getting me excited. I know. I mean, I'll be honest, I was always excited about it, but not to this level. From, in the last 2 weeks, what I've heard, it's been pretty sweet. So
yeah, and I'll be there with Steve at Expo West, also in Anaheim, California here, and there's big deals there too. And so,
oh yeah,
have the right guy. I'm telling you, this guy's badass. You guys,
Steve's the man. He's my favorite guy in this company. I'll tell that in front of everybody.
That son of a bitch has forgotten more than
One thing I do want to just mention, coming from our InCap's motivations for being in the hemp space, it would be, we're seeing more chemistries come online, and it's at an interesting time where there's also an increase in grower interest and support for looking at integrating new techniques or old techniques back. So looking at less soil depletion, more climate smart, whether it's low till, no till, reducing inputs to save money, looking at alternative fertility management cycles. I think keeping that at the forefront of the agronomy conversation as much as possible will be advantageous for just the long-term health from the growing side, because I think it will be easy for hemp to fall into the same sort of systems that create problems that then have to be addressed down the road, because that's something that we're all looking to address in other industries. So just wanted to mention that.
I also want to bring up the fact that the importance that I see in hemp is the fact is we have protein is just, we can't get it all from beef, and the conversion of protein and the omega-3 9 amino acids that come out of hemp, that I think once the consumer gets educated, I just see more hemp being consumed, and protein shakes and all that kind of stuff. I just see that, where it doesn't have the, soybeans has had a big place in it as a protein. And, but with the estrogen in it and everything about the soybean, this is way better for the consumer to on the hemp grain side of things. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, Dalton.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do 100%. It's just healthier. I mean, it's healthier for the consumer. Like you said, there's more benefits to it, I do think, than a soy protein. So that's what I've been hearing a lot of interest of, and that's finally starting to take a little action,
Yes.
or I guess a little bit of movement is the grain side of it. It's kind of stagnant for a while, I will say. But that's something that is becoming to be a big hit, is for the protein side of it.
We're putting it in our meal replacement bar, and so we're using it as a source of protein, and then we're using the barley mix that comes from Australia. We grow it in Idaho, but it's Australian variety that it has high fiber. So between all the grains, we put quinoa, chia, we got all this good ingredients, and roasted hemp is part of our ingredient in this meal replacement bar, and it'll meet all your nutrient requirements. All you need is some vitamin C every once in a while, and that's it. And so we be a good bar for the MREs, for military, for backpackers, outdoorsmen, or whatever. And I think we can do affordably. So we're kind of excited about this. We're just installing this bar machine right now, and we've got the recipes. I took them to Japan with me. They loved it over there.
I was going to
And-
say, if you got any, send them up my way. I'll test them out for you.
Yeah. We got a chocolate one with a cacao bean. So, that's, if you listen to Dr. William Lee, when you look at all the ingredients we put in this thing, it's a very healthy bar. A lot of these meal bars and protein bars are kind of candy bars. They've loaded in so much sugar and cheap ingredients. And so ours will kind of cost us, 50 cents more, but I think it's going to be a better product. And we got a food scientist that he's a chef, and he's helping with some of these recipes and making it better.
So we have a lady that we have here in the community. She's a big caterer, and she's been using a lot of hemp in her ingredients, just in her salads, her cookies, she'll make like a hummus out of it. And I mean, it's phenomenal, and you would never know it was hemp in there. I mean, you can tell there's a little bit different of a flavor, but no one would ever know what it was unless you tell them.
It's got a nutty flavor. I fucking love it.
Yeah, it's good. I like it too. So,
well,
but hey, I got to jump off here. I have another meeting coming up. It was
Just
nice
real
talking.
fast, do either of you know Nigel Hawkins from New Zealand?
Hold on.
He'd registered for the event, and I'm not quite sure how he's connected, but I assume IND is talking with people in New Zealand.
Yeah, we do work with people, and that's what I was looking, but that name doesn't.
Yeah, it's at the email is nigel@hempnewzealand.co.nz. So
Yeah, I don't.
maybe I'll follow up to see what the connection was.
Got on. But yeah, I got to get off here. Nice chatting with all of
Yeah,
you.
nice
and
meeting you,
if you,
Dalton.
talk to you later, Dalton. Thank you,
Yep.
guys.
take care. Bye-bye.
Cool. Well, thanks, Tim. Richard. Glad to see you still on the call. But yeah, we'll continue to talk, and I'll be following up with Maddie to hear how the opening went and make sure that that's included. That report will be, it's gonna be a big report. I don't know how I'm gonna make it. There's so many directions to go.
I'm going to talk to Dairyman, and then I'll talk with the I'll talk with the University of Idaho on some testing. I'd like to see.
I'll talk to Linda with the cafe next week. I'll be seeing her on Wednesdays.
Okay, perfect. Well, I got to go too. I got a guy waiting on me, so I better roll. But
Yeah, I gotta go.
And thank you for picking me up with
Yeah, no
thanks, see ya.
problem. No worries.
Okay, bye.
Talk to you all soon. Bye.